What's going on, everyone, and welcome back. So, last week we worked on parenting so that we can now parent children to its parent game object and move it around and rotate with it. So, in this episode, we're going to do some drag and drop. Now, this is not drag and drop like from the desktop to another application. That's going to be further down the road because it's a completely different process. This episode is going to be moving stuff from one panel to another, like dragging a sprite from the project panel and dropping it into the hierarchy, or dropping it in the inspector, or dragging something from the hierarchy and dropping it into the inspector. And we also have object fields. Now, object fields is basically anything that is an asset is going to use an object field, not like an int field or string field or whatever, or label field, sorry. So I recorded this a couple times before, and I ran into a massive issue that I was not prepared for. And what it was I got the drag and drop running perfect from project panel to the hierarchy, but dragging something from the project panel or the hierarchy to the inspector is where I was having the issues. And mainly the issues were uh, our buttons were set to key down or button down, and our drag is to button down. So what I had to do was switch it to button up for buttons. That way it doesn't actually click the button until you release the mouse button. So yeah, ran into that issue head first, right into the wall, and just said, screw it. You know what? I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna get it all done, and then I'll record again. This was about 2 hours ago, so it took me about 2 hours to figure out a good solution and get it all down. And well, now here we are. So let's I guess go over the code. I wish I could have done this on the fly. I really wanted to, but yeah, slamming into that, I'm like, I'm not going to put it on pause and then find a solution and then, or figure out a solution and then unpause, because it's going to be like forever until it's going to be a good like hour. So, yeah, I'm just doing it this way. All right, so let's see here. There's a whole bunch of stuff that was changed. It's a lot of stuff that has to be changed. I'm actually going to close all of these out. Okay. So, right here. We are no longer going to be using Java's object class. We are going to be using our own object class. So, right here somewhere, object. So we need to create a new object class in the engine package. And it's just going to be labeled object, just like normal. And here it is. So it's an abstract class, just like how our logic behavior is. And it's going to have a private string name, which is going to be default to just empty string. And then we have our public final string name, which returns the name, and setting the name for our getters and setters. Now that we have this, and I'll just go over this real quick. The reason why we're even using this instead of just a regular object is because object.name, let's say we have a sprite or whatever, but the name of the sprite is like brick. Well, if you do like a regular object.name, you would get sprite, you wouldn't get brick. And there's going to be several things in the future that's going to be the same way. So we have to do a complete overhaul on that. So what we need to do is, once we do this, we need to go to texture. And it's going to have, your class is going to have to look like this. It's public class texture extends engine.object implements clonable. So once you do that, you're going to have some issues. First off, there's name variable. We're just deleting that. We're deleting that variable. And then, where is it? Right here, it'll say plus name, and we just change it to name as a function. And you're just going to go down, and it's going to show all the errors right here. And you're just going to go down and change it from just name to the name function. And then, like right here, it'll say name equals split blah 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 crap. And we want to write it like this. So here we're using our setter. Here we're using our getter. And that's it. It'll be like that for all of these classes that we need to change. So it'll be down here, temp.name. Let's see here. Yeah, it's just, it'll just go all the way down. I mean, it's very self-explanatory. If you can't get it, you can always hit me up on Discord. I don't see why you would have a problem with it, but if you have a get method down here that'll say like it'll say like public name, and then it's a getter for the name, you want to delete that function because you'll have an error for that as well. All right, so once you're done with the texture class, you're going to do the same thing with material. So it's also going to extend engine.object. Right here we're saying name equals n. Change it to the setter, so name n. And then, name equals name.replace, but instead we're putting name in the setter function. Same thing with down there. Same thing that we just did with the texture class. Just replacing the name equals or saying the name to the getters and setters for the name. And of course, if there's a getter function in here for the name, remove it. Same thing, remove the name variable. And it's going to be like that for every single asset type. So font, same way. Sprite, same way. GUI skin, same way. Let's see here, what else? I think that's, shader, that way too. And I believe that is it. All right, so once you do all the asset types that same way, now we're going to need logic behavior to be like that as well. So logic behavior is also going to extend object, because we want to be able to drag scripts around. So once it's extended to object, another thing we need to do is go over to gameobject and once again extend object. And we're not just extending object, we're extending engine.object. So anytime you put object, you want to put engine.object. That way it doesn't attempt to grab Java's object. I mean, if you honestly feel like it, you can change the object class name to something else, like I don't know, logic object or whatever you want to name it to, just so that you don't have to write engine.object all the time. But that's completely up to you. Let's see here. Yeah, same thing. Right here, when it says like name equals new game object, you would put name setter new game object. Remove the name variable, name setter. You know, same stuff we were already talking about. And I believe that is it for game object. Update, prepare, okay, yeah. And that's it for this. And that's it for this. We've already covered all that. All right, so you're probably going to have tons of errors in other scripts as well. And you're just going to have to go through those and, you know, once again, change the name equals or the name getter and just use, you know, the regular getter method for that. We'll run into probably some here really soon. Okay, so in the editor script, we want to change these from object to object, or to engine.object. Wait, you don't even have that one yet. So selected asset is going to be engine.object, inspected engine.object as well. So one variable we are going to need right here is the dragged object. Now the dragged object is obviously the object that we're dragging around in the scene. And so if we scroll down, let's see here. Dragging scene. Set selected. No. There's dragging scene. Okay. So below here, we are going to have to add these right here. So it's just basically going to say if I release the mouse button, then dragged object equals null. So it's going to say that we're not dragging anything. Else if dragged object does not equal null, so if we are dragging something, then we actually want to draw like the label and stuff of the object that we're dragging around. So we're going to say GUI.label, dragged object.name, mouse.position. And this is the big reason, or one of the big reasons right here, bow. That right there is grabbing it straight off the engine.object. So that's one big reason. It's that name right there, and we want everything to come off of, or all these things extending off the same script. So then later on we can also add functions and stuff that'll do whatever we need, and that's a huge reason why we had to use engine.object instead. So right below here we have our dragged object and our set, or our getter and setter for dragged object. So public static final engine.object, dragged object, we're returning dragged object. And right here, public static void set dragged object. It's going to be, of course, engine.object, and draggable dragged object equals draggable. Pretty self-explanatory. All right, so this is another thing that I was talking about. Down here, under set inspected, this before was just object. Instead, we're using engine.object. So we just change it there. Set inspected, same way. Engine.object. Change that to engine.object. Engine.object. Yeah. I mean, it's not very hard to change these things. So I would think that you guys wouldn't have an issue. Same thing with down here, g.parent.name. You know, yeah, pretty easy. Let's see here. God, there's just so much to cover. I'm trying to do it as fast as I can. You can pause it if you need any help. All right, so here we have public static byte check drag. So since we're using up instead of down for buttons, we have to have a check drag for whether we actually click a button down. So we're going to keep that as a byte, or we're going to have that as a byte. In the prepare method, we need to say if mouse.getButton down 0, click position.set mouse position. Oh, I guess there's a, click position right here. Sorry, skipped right over that. So private static vector2 click position equals new vector2. This is whenever we click the mouse button down, then it's going to give us the click position. And that's because, let's say I click over here, I click down, oops, I'm dragging. Okay, click down, and I come over here, and I release, it's not gonna show that I clicked on that. And that's how we want it. We only want it to click if we click down and then release. Yeah. So that's how that's going to work. That's why we have to do it that way, so that we can't click over here and then release over here and then the button's called. Where was I? Text field right here. This is our object field. We'll cover that in just a second. All right, so button. Down here, it'll say like if mouse.getButton down 0, then return true or something like that. So what we need instead is if the mouse button down 0, then check drag equals 1. So we need to check whether or not we're dragging. Else if we release the mouse button, then we need to check if rf.contains the click position. So then if it does, we return true. And we're going to do the same thing for centered button, since it's exactly the same as button. All right, so to object class. Now our object class is kind of wonky, but we can just fix it over time. So what it is we're going to take in a rect the name, whatever field name we want, the object that we're trying to check for it being changed, and the type of class that this object is, and of course the padding. So it's almost exactly the same as a text field, except for you just have, you know, the object and the object type. Let's see here, even some of it, like I even took some of it from the button class. Like this right here is from the button class. So all I'm doing right here is I'm just checking whether or not O is null or not. So if the object that we passed in is null, then it's just going to stay just an empty string. If it's not, we're going to get the name of the object. And there's, bam, another reason why we had to do engine.object, obviously. And that just did not click in my head before until, well, I hit it with my forehead. So then we want to, for now, I'll say, is I'm just drawing a text field with the rect, the name, the return value, and the padding. So then we're just calculating just like we do in the button class. I mean, it's a little redundant, but whatever. So we're just getting the current area, and then adding the position of the area to the rect, and of course subtracting the scroll. So then we're going to check if the mouse button is up and it contains the mouse position, and the type does not equal null. So if we pass in null, we're not going to get any drag information, because of course we need the type in order to work with it properly, because we don't want to drag a texture on top of a font variable, obviously, because it's not going to work. So then we're going to go engine.object dragged equals editor.dragged object. So we're just caching the dragged object from the editor. We're checking if it's null or not. And if it is not null, then we're going to check if the class of the dragged object is the same as the type of class that we passed in. That way we don't screw around and get the wrong class. And then we're going to return dragged. Now if we go through all of this and nothing has changed, then we're just going to return the object that we passed in. That's pretty self-explanatory. And I think that is it for GUI. Yeah, that's it. Now I also had to, I don't know where I'm going to put this in the future, but for now I had to set GUI.checkDrag to equal 0 at the end of this. like before the GL swap buffers window, just to reset it back to 0 just in case. Now with the hierarchy. So this is going to allow us to drag a game object from the hierarchy into the inspector, like into a variable in the inspector. That's render. We don't want any of that. Okay. So we need byte dropped equals 0. So this is just checking if we dropped it or not. That way we know whether it's going to be parented to another object in the scene or if it's just going to be parented to, well, unparented, I guess you want to call it. And that's what that variable is going to do. So then down here, right here. I believe in your version it'll say if click rec.contains mouse position, then right here, and then it'll say this inside of it. If the mouse button down is 0, wait, no. It'll say if mouse.get button down editor.set selected G. Well, you want to change that down to an up, of course. And then we're going to say else if mouse.get button down, then we want to set the draggable to G for the editor. And then if dropped equals 0, then dropped equals check drop G. And what check drop is going to do is it's just a byte. We need the parent that we're going to parent it to. And the reason why I made this function is so I didn't have to write redundant code up here. And what it does, it says if the mouse button is up, then we're going to get the dragged object. We're going to check whether it's null or not. And the hierarchy, for the moment, all we're going to be able to do is drag sprites. We're not going to be able to drag anything else into the actual hierarchy because there's nothing else that would be considered a game object. So if we're dragging a sprite, then we're going to set it as a sprite, create a game object with the name of dragged.name. Going to create a new sprite renderer, set the sprite on the sprite renderer, add the component to the game object, and then we're going to parent it to the parent that we passed in. And then we're going to return null. Now, if we did not have a button up, then we're going to return 0, saying that we did not drop anything. And so that's all that. So then if we come all the way down here, this is our next thing we need to add. It's going to say if r.contains mouse.position and dropped equals 0, then it's going to say check drop null because we don't want any parent. And that's it for the hierarchy. Now for the project panel. I don't think anything's null or new right there. Render assets. Okay. So I did not do this with any other thing except for sprites. And I also added game objects just so that we could test it out. So scroll down here to sprite. And this is going to look exactly the same for the other asset types too. I just didn't add them to it. So right down here, this is new. So underneath this last else if, it'll say if GUI.checkDrag equals 1 and r.contains mouse position. Because if you remember, we're setting check drag to 1 if we actually click on here. And if we don't, then check drag is going to be 0. So if it's 1 and the rect contains the mouse position, then obviously this is the button that we clicked on because it was the last time that check drag was set to 1. So we're going to set GUI.checkDrag to equal 0, and then we're going to set editor.setDraggableObject sprites.getI. And I guess I didn't do data type for. Oh, there is no data type for it. Okay. Now, did I already do inspector? I don't think I did. No, I did not. Okay. So right here in this try statement, I'm basically just creating this right here. So saying sprite equals sprite s.get ba.behavior, saying engine.object o equals GUI.object field, and then I'm just pasting in this rect right here, passing in split 0, the sprite, and sprite.class so that we can compare it, and 100, just like how we do the other ones pretty much. And like I said before, I also just copied sprite and pasted it down here, changed the name to gameobject so we can check if it's a game object or not. And doing the same thing with the object field. Well, if you copy and paste it, it'll just be the same. Except we're going to change this to gameobject, and gameobject.class, and go. Because change this from sprite to go. And yes, that is completely it. It took 33 minutes just to talk about it. All right, so I guess no more talking, and let's see it in action. All right, so if I click right here and I move, it doesn't select it. It only, and if I click over here and move, it's not going to select it. It's only going to select it if I click here and release here. Sprites, if I take, let's say this brick, I'm going to add another brick to the camera. So now the camera has a brick. I'll place another brick over here, unparented. And I set up a, I'm going to add a class because I added a gameobject variable just so that I could set a gameobject. So here's the gameobject variable. And if I take this brick, I can actually drag it over here and release it onto G. So yeah, it's pretty good stuff, man. So, if you have any issues at all, I am so sorry that I had to do this, off screen. I totally wish I could have done it on the fly. But if you have any issues whatsoever, please hit me up on not Patreon. Yeah, Discord. So please hit me up on Discord. I'm always available. Except for when I'm sleeping. I'm always willing to help you anytime you need help. So, yeah, please hit me up if you have issues. And so, next episode, I have no idea what we'll be doing, but we'll be doing it very well. I know there's several things we need to get working a little bit better. So we may do some tidying up, maybe tidying up this code right here so it's not so redundant. We might make another function for like a procedural function for all this stuff, so we don't have to every time we add a data type just like create a whole new thing. But yeah, we'll just need to clean up some code. And I guess see what's happening after that. All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. And